It's awkward for us to have a spiritual conversation. Couples, okay, it's easier for them to have sex than to pray for each other. Just think about that, right? It's just so awkward, difficult, because we don't create the culture of that. And you're never going to feel strong enough, good enough. You're never going to feel spiritual enough. You just have to say, I'm going to do it. I don't care what, I don't care how. I'm just going to lean into it. And some days are going to be better than others, but I'm just going to do it.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Between Sundays. We're so excited that you have tuned in for another episode, praying that these episodes have blessed you. Pastor, we're hearing so many great comments from people here at church that are enjoying the podcast, and that's encouraging to us when we hear that.
I love hearing people walk through the doors and they say, hey, Pastor, I really appreciate that podcast, or I've listened to that podcast. And just so encouraging. You know, our goal is to really help this local church. We want to minister into their lives, their real lives between Sundays. But I also know there's others that listen in too.
Yeah. And we've gotten text messages from people even outside of our church that are listening, and it's just kind of cool. You know, you never know where it's going to go, who's going to listen. So hopefully anyone who's listening is being blessed by it in some way, and hopefully it's resourceful and helpful. And today's episode's no different, and we're tackling a topic that all of our topics are important, I believe, but this one probably hits home for us personally because we can certainly relate. In our last episode, we talked about ministry to singles, and we talked about, some of that at this season of our life we can't relate to as much, being married. But this one we can certainly relate to. We're in different seasons of this topic, and that topic is parenting. I'm a dad. I've got 3 amazing kids. Grayson is 9, Novi is 6, and Isaac is 5. And it is a wild time in the Haley's house right now. And then you have 3 kids?
Yeah, Haley's house has got a lot of energy.
Yeah, we call it the circus.
Yeah, there you go. Our energy is a little bit different. And again, we have 3 of our own. And then we also have a daughter-in-law. So Trenton's 25 and Bethany. And then Tanner, he's 22, going on 23 just next week.
Wow.
And he's in college. And then we have Thatcher, who's 13. So there's just a whole different ball game. So much fun. But lots of lessons learned.
Yeah, and hopefully that today is what we're going to draw from that well of you have been. This sounds like I'm aging you. You've been in this for a long time.
Decades. Yeah.
You're getting close to the season. I know that people are starting to hear this more from you and Sister Zuniga, but you're getting into the season of requesting grandchildren.
Yes, we are. We're excited about that. Really, yeah.
So Trenton, Beth, if you're listening, hopefully you're listening.
Help us out.
There you go. But today we're talking all about parenting, and the reality is in the day and age that we live in, parenting is tough. It's always been tough. I don't know that I've ever had a conversation with a parent, no matter what season of life they're in, no matter what generation of parenting they were in, there's a common denominator. It's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work. There's a lot of challenges. And we also recognize that as our world is where it's at today, the challenges, they just look different. There's some commonalities, there's some things that are similar, but there's a lot of things that parents are facing now that that so many people they don't even know, they haven't experienced that. There's not a lot of education around it. You're learning as you go on some of this, but there are some things that we're going to draw from a well of your experience in parenting here today. But parenting is hard. It's for me personally, probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done. I say marriage is hard. Marriage is difficult. Parenting is a whole different level of difficult. And the reality is, all parents have a common denominator. They've all failed at some point. At some point in parenting, we've all made a mistake. We've all done something that we wished we could have, hit the rewind button and do over. We're not perfect. Everyone struggles. If you have children, there's going to be some kind of struggle with parenting. And the reality is we all need encouragement. We all need help. We all need resources and tools. And anyone listening to this podcast today, they need help. They're probably looking for some kind of resource, some kind of help in the area of parenting. And that's what we want to do today. So let's dive into this. What is it that you want to say to the parents of GPC?
Yeah, this topic here is so personal and so important to so many of us because honestly, we don't really know what our kids are going through. If we saw the truth behind the curtain, it's intimidating. Some parents are afraid. They not pastor, they parent in a sense of fear. Like I'm going to lose my kid. My kid's going to do something crazy. The ultimate is going to happen, whether that's suicide, run away. Something crazy. And so, man, there's just so much complexity here. We actually were at a conference last year, and Chris Hodges was talking about a segment when he just asked his students, what do you wish your parents knew? And just fill in the blank, right? And so we took that idea and we brought it home. And I spent some time with our young people and asked them just honest, again, anonymously. I don't want names, but just be honest. Just share with me, give me a peek into your world. And when we asked the question, what do I wish my parents knew? I was a little blown away by the response. And I was, man, not here, like not at GPC, like not at Holy Ghost Field Homes, right? Not at people that have been raised. Again, I don't know, who they were, but some of the response was like this, it's uncomfortable for me to talk about God in our house. Like, wow, that's an eye opener. How much, it was not all negative. Some of it was really inspirational, really heartfelt, like comments like, I wish they knew how much I looked up to them. How much they influenced me, how much they really protect me. But some of them were a little bit deeper. Some of them were a little bit more honest. Like, I wish my parents knew how I battle with pornography at such a young age, how I feel broken and I question life. I'm battling transgender and bisexuality. I wish my parents knew how to model communication better. I wish there wasn't so much fighting, so much arguing. I wish I didn't hear that or see some of that. I wish they knew on the good side how much I love them. Like, I know I may seem like sometimes I don't care, I'm not listening, I'm pushing you away, but man, how much I really do need you and your strength and how much I love you. Some of it was like how lonely I feel and I want them to be proud of me, of what I'm trying to do. And it's hard. It's difficult. How much anxiety I feel. Like, wow, that's just words that you young people are contending with. How discouraged I am and where I'm at now in my life and what the future looks like. I'm just discouraged by all this. These were moments and just questions that I just had to just sit back and say, okay, what do we do about that? And that's just when you hear that, when you see, and these are good families. Like, we're not talking about, this is not a prison. These are great kids. And, if you were to ask me, name that one, like who, it'd be hard to identify, but this is their reality.
Yeah, and that's so eye-opening because when you listen through that list, it almost doesn't seem real. Like, because we come in here week after week and, we see each other at our best. The parents, they're putting their kids, in their Sunday best, whether that's their teenagers are showing up and they're smiling. But this isn't like you said, this isn't a sample from some other community, from some other organization. This is right here at GPC. These are kids that walk the hallways of our church. These are kids that are a part of VSM. These are our kids, and these are real challenges that they're facing. That what I love is that the phrase that they're finishing is that I wish my parents knew this. It's not that they're wanting to keep it a secret. Like, that kids are looking for parents to be parents. That's something that I feel like I've learned through this study. I did a similar thing at a retreat that I was a part of, and it was so eye-opening. And honestly, it's a little gut-wrenching whenever you see the real battles. But what I see through this is that kids want their parents to help them. Now, I don't have teenagers yet. My wife and I were youth pastors for a little while, and we experienced that side of it. I don't know what it's like to be a parent of a teenager, so I can't speak from that perspective. But I believe that even through the teenage years, which is struggled, a lot of tough times there, a lot of challenges, they still want their mom to be mom. They want their dad to be dad. And that's what I hope this episode, what we're about to get into, really is going to help some moms and dads. So we want this to be actionable, practical. So let's talk about just some ways that we can help the dads and the moms of GPC. The reality is you just listed things that their kids are dealing with right now. What are some things that we can do to help them?
Yeah, when I was just thinking this through, I didn't ever imagine this part of it being the podcast. But I was on a plane, I was flying somewhere, and I just went inside, meaning just kind of like, okay, Tim Zuniga, if you could talk to moms and dads, what would you want to tell them? Like, please listen to me. Like, what do I have to do to get your full and undivided attention right now? Like, please, I'm trying to help you. And what would I say in that moment? Like, what are the intentional things that you need to say? Because if you're not intentional, the unintentional happens, okay? So we got to be intentional. So what do you want to be intentional about? So I really came up with about 6 things that I would just want to impart into every mom and dad and say, whatever you do, like these are non-negotiables. So I think for me, the first one is really faith in God, okay? Like that's a conversation because we have to work harder and harder as parents to form and shape the hearts of our kids towards God. There's so many distractions and so many things vying for their attention. There's so many different options that it really is going to be harder work to shape their hearts for God. I remember reading a book. It's called They're Already Gone, and meaning kids that were raised in church that left church, and why are they no longer in church? And this doesn't happen when they, are their senior year of high school or their first year in college. This happens in junior high when things are beginning to form and questions and unanswered questions begin to shape in their spirit that never get answered, never get talked about, never get discussed. And by the time they can make their own decisions, they've already made the decision to leave church. And so with that in mind, I remember Dr. James Dobson said something that just has really stayed with me. And he said, every day that goes by without spiritual training for your children is a day that you will never get back or never recapture. Just think about that, right? Every day. Every day that you do not spiritually train your children is a day that you will never get back. And so if I have any regrets as a dad, and just being transparent, if I have any regrets, you're a pastor, like you're supposed to have all of this right. You're the perfect, model of this. There's, again, upfront, true transparency. Like, man, I have so many regrets and so many failures as being a parent. And again, thank God for Julie that just we come together and to do our very best. But if I could do anything different, and which I'm trying to do now with Thatcher, is letting God's word really be a light and a lamp to our feet. Even today, driving to school, we have a prayer routine. I think I've said this before, but we have a street called prayer, right? And so when we turn down that street, again, we just know. And again, we were praying today, honestly, not praying. We drove down that street. I got to the end of that road and I didn't pray. My mind was in on other things. And Thatcher says, Dad, are we going to pray? I said, yes, we are. I began to pray right there over him that day or today, this morning. And again, bring out my phone and say, okay, what's the verse of the day? And we just let the verse, what does that mean? Okay, tell me what that means. I'm not trying to do about, but I just want to be intentional about God's word and spiritually training.
So why do you think that is a challenge in Christian parents' home, good parents? I mean, you just gave. I mean, you just said it. You're the transparency, which I love so much. It was a challenge for you, even being senior pastor, right? What is the challenge? Why is that such a difficult thing for some of us parents to do?
Honestly, I think is because we're awkward with it. Mm. We're not strong we believe strong, but we don't practice strong. And so, again, it's awkward for us to have a spiritual conversation. Couples, okay, it's easier for them to have sex than to pray for each other. Just think about that, right? It's just so awkward, difficult, because we don't create the culture of that. And you're never going to feel strong enough, good enough. You're never going to feel spiritual enough. You just have to say, I'm going to do it. I don't care what, I don't care how. I'm just going to lean into it. And some days are going to be better than others, but I'm just going to do it.
Do you think that because of, our families know us better than anybody, right? They
right.
see you guys get the Sunday versions of us. Our family sometimes get a different version that, we don't allow everybody to see.
Right.
And do you think that at times, because of that it makes it, I think the enemy can use that against us to have these spiritual conversations, these moments. Do you think that that's part of the reason that we feel the weight of, oh man, they just saw me, in a big fight with their mom, or hey, they just saw me, handle a situation wrong in the home, and so now how am I going to sit down and teach them about the fruit of the Spirit? Do you think that that's part of the challenge?
Huge part of it, because we condemn ourselves. Like, who are we? We're unqualified to do this. Again, we've really checked ourselves out because I did something wrong or whatever. Yeah, that's a huge part of it. I think we need to get over ourselves and realize that we're human and continue to do the right thing.
Isn't that even a lesson that we could? I mean, as I'm just talking this out with you, that's a powerful lesson to teach our kids in and of itself. That, right? No one is without sin. No one is perfect. Every person has probably struggled in their home in some way, right? They've had a moment that they're not proud of. But even to model to your kids that even through those things that I wish we would have handled differently, our faith in God is still paramount. We're still going to lean in. We're going to make it right. We're going to clean it up, right? We're going to do have the necessary conversations. But that doesn't change that we still need to have this growing and developing faith in God. Those moments don't mean that we don't talk about this stuff. Those moments don't negate the fact that we should have the conversations. If anything, it proves why we need to have those conversations. So it doesn't, because of our minds, the way it works, I believe the way that comes against us, but it should push us into these conversations even more. And there's lessons that our kids can learn through that.
No question about it.
So what are some practical tips in this? Because I know we've got 6 and we got to get through them, but this is a big one. Because if we don't get this right, like if this is a foundational part that we are helping develop and nurture this faith in God for our kids. So what are some practical tips that you'd give parents?
Yeah, let me just say this on all of these. Whatever conversation you have, a tip is, do something where you're distracted. Like driving is a great time to have conversations where you're not looking at each other. It's not awkward, but you got windshield time, I guess some people have called it. Yeah. And I think those are so helpful. Like, hey, we can have a conversation as we're going to go here. And that just helps in all of these questions. But specifically for spiritual or God or the faith in God, in developing that and training that, I think one is have intentional spiritual conversations. I mean, literally like this, ask questions like, when's the last time you spoke in tongues? Like, when's the last time God spoke to you? Like, where do you feel, or what Bible story is helping you in your faith right now?
Yeah, wow.
Lead with questions, right? Lead with questions. Let just the conversation, but it's a spiritual context.
Yeah. And I would guess that this is a muscle, right? So the more you do it, the easier it gets, the stronger those conversations. Because I'm sure it's awkward, right? Like I think you even told recently some of these questions that you and Thatcher talked through, right? But that's something that over time, it just gets easier and easier. It's not awkward anymore, right?
Yeah, it does. It's like a muscle that improves. And I guess that's the next point or next tip is you have to model this, like not just on Sundays, but we model it through our lives. I think what kids cannot bear is really inconsistency. When they see discrepancy, here's mom and dad on Sunday, but this is what they are at the home. Like there has to be some congruency of who we are at Walmart, work, at home, in church, that I'm not a different person. I'm not acting in a different way. I want to model that. Means that there's time they should see you reading and you should read together or pray together. That those are things that you're modeling. You should model in church as well. Like I think if you're a mom and dad, Your kids are going to take cues from you in your praise, in your worship, in your response to the preached word, how you conduct your faith, how you touch God in those moments, even in your home. When they see crisis, how do you respond? Is prayer a first response, or is that a last response, right? And I think modeling that, demonstrating that, showing that over and over again in every situation is, again, kids learn from their eyes more than their ears. They see it, and what they see is what embeds in their spirit. It's what they think is true. So when they see you live it, it's going to be easier for them to understand it.
I think you've said this phrase, I've seen it before, that you can't pray out of your kids what you've lived into them. I remember so many times dealing with parents who would be requesting prayer for their kids, for things and struggles and issues and stuff that their kids are dealing with. And you know the lifestyle of the parent. You know the decisions that the parent had made. And now they're requesting prayer. They're asking to pray things out that they have lived into their kids. I think another phrase I've heard you say is, you as a pastor, you're not going to preach out. You can't preach out things that parents are living in their kids.
Yeah, whatever you're living in your kids, my best sermon's not going to knock that out. Right. That's a lose situation for me. You have way more influence in that. I think one of the other tips is that we have dreams for our kids. Like, I want our kids to be successful. I want my son or daughter to achieve this. I want them to go and have this. And we have dreams. The question that I ask is, do you have spiritual dreams for your kids?
Wow.
And do we communicate them? And one thing that I've been wrestling with lately is this idea of a phenom, like somebody that is just so skilled, has unique ability, usually young, right? They're just a soccer phenom. They're am I saying that right? Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Give an example of somebody like in the sports world.
Right, like a 15-year-old that is signing contracts and they're not even close, right? Yeah. But they're so skilled, they're so good, so, their abilities.
Like Tiger Woods was a phenom. Yeah. Like he was on their radar from the time he was a little kid, right?
Sure.
So he's a phenom.
Yeah. And the question hit me, do we have spiritual phenoms? Like, where are those young kids in our lives, in our church, in our families, that their acumen for spiritual things and their heart for God? And what are we doing to shape that and acknowledge that, right? That, to me, is something that I pray that we understand and see in our children.
Yeah, that's so good. All right, so we got number one is we're going to help and develop their faith in God. So the second one is a major challenge in our world today, because this area of their sexuality is under direct assault in our world. So help parents today, help us with the area of sexuality with our kids.
I call it the second greatest decision in your life, until you're married, to stay pure before God in your sexual area of your life. Again, as I look back and walk the journey with people's greatest pain in the area of their greatest regrets, where they feel the most shame, where they know this is where they've created the most problems, is almost always in the area of sexuality. Like, they realize that's caused them more issues in their life than any other thing. And so for us to have just some honest conversations regarding your kid's sexuality. People are going to do something with their sexuality. Your kids are going to do something with their sexuality, and we need to be the one that guides them, right? Not someone at school, certainly not someone that you don't agree with, and because it's a conversation that's happening all the time. And for us as parents to step in there, and I got to tell you, this is a very hard conversation, okay? I was raised in a generation, I never had the talk. Like, I didn't know the birds and the bees, again, that conversation, sex in my home growing up was taboo, meaning you just never discussed it. It was never a topic. You kind of learn about it through other means. And again, most of those means were not healthy and not positive, not
tainted
good.
View of
tainted,
it, yeah.
For sure. And so, as a parent that says, I got to fix that, I remember making up my mind, like, okay, when they're this age, I'm going to talk to them. Now, granted, the age is dropping down. There's 8, 9-year-olds, 7-year-olds that are battling with this, that you need to be in tune with where your kid's at in their sexual development, okay? And I remember saying, I need to have this conversation. So one night, okay, this is it. I'm going over. I'm going to talk with them. And I'm making my way into their room, and I pause in the hallway, and I feel this cold sweat, like, man, this is really, really weird, And I remember Julie mouthing at me as she's watching me walk over in the room. She says, "You're a chicken, right? You're a chicken." And here's a guy that has literally walked with parents and talked about sexuality and how, you need to talk to your kids. And when it came my turn, it was a game changer, And so I realized, but I needed to be the voice in their head when it came to the matters of sexuality. Because this is one area that is not going away, and it's such a huge influence.
Yeah, I tell you a story of just my own experience with that. I'm thankful for my upbringing, but I also my parents, similar, story. I never had the talk, and so all of my education came from the street, quote unquote, the street, or school or the locker room, and it was a very tainted view. And fast forward to the day I get married, and I literally, we say I do. She's my bride. We're in a covenant relationship, and we leave the little reception after the wedding, and we're headed to our first night as a married couple. And I'm probably 15 minutes from the hotel, and my phone rings, and it's my dad, which is already awkward, right? And so I don't know why, but I answered the phone, and so I answered the phone. I said, "Hey, Dad." He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're on our way to the hotel." And so I'm going to keep this clean, by the way.
Sure, thank you.
And so he says, "Well, I just realized we've never really had the talk. Is there anything you need to know?" Well, I'm 24 years old at this point,
right.
And so I tell Dad, we're gonna figure this out. I think we got it. But I look back on that and think, even for him at that moment, it was probably one of the hardest phone calls he's ever made. But that was the first hint of even talking about sexuality. Now, I don't look back and I don't judge my dad, because I have no idea how. I'm about to walk through all of that myself in this season. But how much could I have been potentially saved from had those conversations, at least educating and knowing that this is a safe place to have those conversations. It could have been a game changer. So I can testify, like we got to lean in as someone who's has been on the other side of it and now walking into it with my own kids. We got to lean into those conversations.
And I want to take it just a little bit more sincere, or not sincere, but a little bit deeper here, okay? Because the challenges of like sexting and pornography and internet and apps and games.
This is real stuff.
This is real. We don't realize all the different ways that our kids are being influenced by this. And so they need your conversation, and then complicate it with the matter that, our world's view of sexuality, with the LGBTQ plus -3, whatever, it continues to grow, and confusion sets in our children, right? Like, again, they're wrestling with, there's a spirit of our world. There's a sexual spirit. There's a perverse spirit. You don't hear those words anymore, but there is a spirit that wants to taint your children's view of sexuality, what's normative, what's not normative. Like, there are subject matters that say, sexuality is a social construct, meaning gender roles are things that we make up, but really they're not true. There's just the way you were raised. Things like that begin to confuse, and then you add to that things like, well, you're non-binary, meaning you could choose it's more fluid. And then you get even more complicated with like gender dysphoria, where people are disassociating their bodies with their sexualities and begin to wrestle with questions, okay? There's some real education that is needed here, and conversations. Like, for instance, there's a sexuality, there's a spectrum on that. Meaning, let me just clear that up a little bit. On the feminine side, there are some girls that are really feminine, and there are some that are more masculine. But doesn't mean they're gay or homosexual or bisexual or whatever.
Right. That doesn't determine their sexuality.
That doesn't determine their sexuality. The same thing on the masculine side, right? There are some men that are high revved up testosterone, right? They're manly men, you want to call them. There's some men that are more feminine. That doesn't mean they're gay, okay? That doesn't make them homosexual. That just means that's just where they are on that, and that's okay. We need to understand that. Sometimes when somebody has a tendency, they come across a little feminine, we throw them in the category and label them.
Right.
When a young lady has more, she likes sports or climbs trees or she's tomboyish, maybe, right? Yeah. We throw them in a category, and no, that's not true. I think some good, healthy conversation helps young people discover, no, God created you a certain way with a certain gender, and that's what you are. And how you express that is God's uniqueness in your life.
And that's challenging. Again, sitting here in my season of life with my oldest being 9 years old, we're already seeing just by the nature of being in the world. Now we do our best to protect what we allow them to see and watch. Right? Someone told me, I think it was Raymond Woodward said one time that innocence leaks. With kids, innocence leaks. Just because we are here on earth, our innocence. And you think about your story, my story, just because of what we're going to be exposed to by the nature of driving on the highway, your innocence is going to leak. But when I heard that, I thought, well, that's true, but I want to protect as much as I can how rapidly it leaks. I don't want to poke extra holes in that, and make it leak faster. And so in this area of all of the sexuality, I think it's important that we are acknowledging that and having the conversations with our kids at the age that they are starting to wonder, ask questions, or we're being aware enough to know when it's time. But it's also important that we're being really careful about what we're putting in front of our kids that's educating them on these topics. I've heard stories even in the last couple of weeks about really, really great parents who had, a particular movie on that they thought there's no harm in this, only to discover 5 minutes in that this is 100% shaping the idea of sexuality through a cartoon. Now, that doesn't surprise us, right? We know that that's the world we live in. But we have a choice as parents. We have a responsibility as parents to protect and then to lean in and have those conversations about sexuality.
Let me say this too. Invariably, there's going to be someone that fails in this area. Okay.
Sure.
All right. And again, however that unfolds, I think we need to be the ones that say, listen, it's okay to ask God to forgive you. Okay.
Amen.
Right. It's okay, and again, not that what you've done is okay, but we know that God can forgive, and we know that God can create anew. We used to call that, your second virginity, so to speak, where again, from this moment on, I'm making a pledge, a vow to remain pure until marriage. I think we sometimes have really condemn people, shame them, and to the degree that it becomes a mark on them and they can't recover from it. Not that we take these lightly. They need to be serious consequences, but you also need to know at the end of that consequence, there is a freedom of forgiveness, and there is love, and there is a hope that is beyond your mistake.
Yep. Amen. Okay, so how about any practical tips that you would offer to parents in the area of sexuality? I think we've already mentioned it's really having the conversation, right? It's leaning into those tough conversations.
Yeah, I would say if you've not had the conversation, number one, have the conversation, okay? There's a great resource that is available, and it comes from the authors of Every Man's Battle, but I think the book is entitled Every Young Man's Battle. That is a helpful tool. I think that's a great tool that I've used that I think could be very helpful. I think having an ongoing conversation is just as important, right? Like ask the questions.
It's not a one and done.
Right, right. Have the questions. I think to me, those are important tips.
So this next area that you want to talk about here is the purpose, our kids' purpose and our role in helping to develop that, giving opportunity for them to grow in their purpose. So let's talk about their purpose.
Yeah, believing that every child has a divine purpose, believing that God created them for a unique mission, believing that their uniqueness has the ability to change the world. When we begin to understand that and begin to speak that over our kids, something begins to transform in their way of thinking about life, okay? We're not here just to exist, but so one of the things that I say often in my prayer is that God help them to never compare themselves with other kids. There's always going to be somebody taller, bigger, faster, quicker, smarter, more athletic, more prettier, whatever, more money, more fame, more popular. There's always that right? But no one's like you. Out of 8 billion people in the world, there's not another you. God is made you unique and rare and special, and you need to know that. And you need to believe that. And with that, God has given you such an incredible ability to do amazing things with your life. And so I think helping your children unpackage their uniqueness, their gifts, their talents, their callings, discover their purpose. This is such a formative time when we can help them identify their uniqueness in the world.
So you mentioned you have 3 kids, and 2 of them are grown. One in college, one's married now, and then you have Thatcher, who's 13.
13. Mm-hmm.
So, in your experience with Trenton and Tanner, and now with Thatcher, what advice, what tips would you give to parents in this area of helping kids develop their purpose?
Yeah, our tendency as parents is I want them to like what I want what I like. Like I've done my very best to raise them up as Charger fans, right? Like
how'd that go?
I failed, right? Like they don't care if the Chargers win or lose. Like it's not a big deal, right? And so yeah, it's horrible.
Well, that's a failure to you.
Yeah,
some people look at it as a major success,
right? Like yeah, you actually won, buddy. But yeah, so that's the tendency. Like I failed, but I think really trying to let them try a lot of things. You say no to your kids a lot. I'm going to try to find a lot of ways to say yes, okay? I say no a lot. So if I can find a way to say yes, you want to try something, you want to buy, I've bought musical instruments that have just, now collect dust. I have paid for sports. I've paid for events. I've tried to give them experiences.
Let me just ask you, okay?
Sure.
And then put you on the spot. Like
okay.
What's the most recent thing you said yes to that you're like, oh man, this is not going to work?
Bought a huge piano, a huge piano. And just a nice piano because somebody thought I would be interested in not me, one of my kids, Thatcher specifically, would like to play. And ironically, I do hear him tinkering in there, playing. And again, I want his curiosity. I want if you want to draw, for Trent when he was young, he loved to draw, so we would buy things to help him draw, just trying to tap into that creative element, right? I try to give them experiences that would just open their eyes, their world to something that they would not be used to. Try to get them around people that were interesting people. One of the privileges and honors in being a pastor and knowing some great people is I got to bring my kids in close to them. I don't regret that. I regret exposing them and hearing stories that would shape their mind. So to me, they don't have to be me. They don't have to be, if God wants to call them to ministry and pastoring and thank you, Jesus. And I tell God, you don't have to, but you'd miss a great opportunity because they see it, right? They see it every day. They see their mom and dad every day living it out. And so but if God calls them to be a great congressman or business leader or a great whatever, I'm on board. Live for God. Live out the highest calling of God in the world is what he called you to do, right? We need brilliant teachers and we need amazing, business owners and legislators and sports people. We need great doctors and physicians and lawyers. We need great plumbers and great housewives and stay-at-home moms. And we need great whatever, right? Anointed. If that's your purpose, no shame. Yeah. Put your head up and smile and thank God. So I think helping them discover their purpose.
Any other tips on purpose?
I think you staying curious yourself.
Break that down for me.
Just, trying, for me, like adventure is, I'd rather have an experience than a gift. right? If you want to buy me a gift,
Yeah.
if you want to buy me something, buy me an experience, right?
Yeah.
I want to try things. I want to stretch my heart. I want to see things differently. So to me, but I think one of the things that I would say is pray that, let them hear these words over you. Pray these over you. Like when I pray, it's biblical, but put your hand on your children. Like I put my hand on their head and just ask God, Lord, shape that heart. Help them to find their uniqueness. Help them to know you've made them for such a time as this. Just your words washing over them could be enough to just keep them alive.
Yeah, so good. All right, halfway there.
Okay.
This fourth thing that you would say that parents need to be intentional about, what would that be?
If I was to give a gift to anybody, if you ask me what, besides the Holy Ghost going to heaven, okay, just on the if I had a magic wand and I could wave that and give something in it, I would give every individual a healthy self-esteem. It is amazing to me what people with low self-esteem or struggle with self-esteem have to and go through and put themselves in, and it's just incredible. I remember a real a research about high school students and trying to identify what is that thing that causes some students to have a healthy self-esteem and those that struggled with self-esteem. And so they looked at all kinds of different factors, whether it's athletics, whether they were smart, like they just did good at school and grades and testing, whether it's popularity, whether it was money, all of these different things. And what they found out in all of these different categories is, there's kids that are committing suicide. These are kids that are making horrible decisions. But what they discovered is the commonality of those kids that had a healthy self-esteem. It boiled down to this: their view of God.
Wow.
How did they view God? And so, this is just another part of, as a believer, our value comes from God. Our esteem, our worth, our meaning comes from God. It doesn't come from things or people or their words or accomplishments. How many people are so accomplished, but yet they hate their lives? They hate what they are. They hate what they've become, right? They struggle with that. You've seen people in the news, people, and you think you have everything to live for, and yet they're miserable people because deep down inside, there's something that's off, that's not right, and they've never reconciled. And so being able to shape that young and just letting them know, right? Your value comes from God, your purpose, your meaning, your worth. Saying that. I've said that. I've struggled with self-esteem. I mean, I'm a little guy, right? Again, if you don't know that, it's
big
true.
Heart.
Yeah, big heart, like 6'7" heart, okay? But honestly, praying, God, you are what brings me value. You are praying that 1,000 times. God, you are what gives me meaning, purpose. You are what makes me worthy. You. And I can't tell you how true and deep and meaningful and life-shifting that has been for me. But praying that over your kids is a game changer for them.
Yeah, and it's amazing how this one and the previous one are so intricately connected, because you were talking about, your purpose comes from God. How many people do you know that are doing, from the outside looking in, seemingly looks like they're doing great things, but their life's a mess, they're a wreck, and probably somewhere along the way, they are misaligned with their purpose, right? Because of their view of God, their faith in God, whatever one of these are. And so they're misaligned. And so now they have gotten their identity wrapped up in something else other than who God created them to be. Teenagers, we know this is an age-old, timeless truth that there's going to be times where they're wrestling with their self-esteem. There's times whenever you don't feel pretty enough, you don't feel talented enough, you don't feel like you have enough all of the things that you just mentioned. But you have told us that really that has nothing to do with your esteem. It's you recognizing who I am as a follower of Jesus, how I view God and my relationship with Him is where I should get my value from. And my wife always talks about this, even in the areas of with girls, with young ladies who they have allowed themselves to be valued, to get their value from a young man or how a guy views them. And what we see the end result of that is, well, they're battling with low self-esteem. But the reality is they're battling with a value problem. They're battling with what they've allowed to define who they are and what makes them valuable. And that's why, and I love when Lauren talks about this, because she would tell you that if you get your value from God, it doesn't matter how, that idiot boy looks at you or views you or says what he says
Doesn't
about
look at you, right?
Or exactly, because you have gotten your value. You know who you are in Christ. You know what your purpose is in Christ. And so I love that you said you labeled it as self-esteem, but it has very little to do with self. It has so much to do with who we are in Christ, and that's where our esteem. He esteems us. It's our esteem is through Him. Nothing I can produce in it. Right? You could be the best at whatever, but that's something you can do, and that's not where you're going to get your value from.
I wish I could teach this a whole lot better. I just earnestly recognize the power of this understanding. I think on a practical side, I think for girls, they really need the affirmation of their fathers and their mothers. Like they need to know, you're beautiful.
Mm.
I love who you are. You're gorgeous to me. That they need to know they're okay. When they don't get that, they will try everything they can do to try to get that affirmation from somebody, from the world, and those don't usually end it well. If you're a dad and you have a daughter, they need your words. If you're a mom, you need to affirm that daughter that thank God you're a godly lady. Thank God that you are modest. Thank God. Again, they have to go through so much. They need our affirmation. But if you're a guy, I think you need the approval of your mom and dad or fathers and mothers. Young men need to know, you know what? I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. Man, you're doing a great job, right? Like I never asked Thatcher, did you get an A? Of course I want him to get an A. What I ask him is, did you do your best?
Wow.
Because whatever that is, if it's his best, then that's okay, right? If I'm asking him if he's getting straight A's, I'm comparing him with every other student. Yeah. I want him to know, you know what? You have my approval. When you're doing your best, you know what? I'm proud of you. I'm telling you, if my dad was alive now and he called me and said, son, I'm so proud of you. As a 54-year-old man, it just drive me to tears now.
Right.
You never lose that hunger.
Crave it.
You crave that affirmation. You crave that approval. And man, how often us as parents, we hold that because we're struggling in our own world. We don't like, and yet, this is why we perpetuate family dysfunction. This is why we perpetuate, the things that we hate about our families or our lives. We need to pour back into them what we never got.
I think that leads so perfectly into this next segment, and that's the value of the family dynamic that we're creating for our kids. So talk to us about the family, being intentional about a family.
Yeah, that is such a changing world because, again, there's no perfect family. Every family has some pain and regrets, and I say this because it's true. Your eternal family, your church family, will last longer than your natural family because it's true.
Some people are thankful for that.
That's true, but because perfection was lost in the garden. But the goal, your kids want to be with you. They want a relationship with you. Okay, that's the goal.
It's a paradigm shift.
I think Andy Stanley said it like this. Like, here's his goal. Like if I want my kids to want to be with me when they have the choice not to be.
Yeah.
Okay. I just years and years ago I heard that. Like
that's years later. That's proven, right?
I want to live that as that's the watermark. Like when my kids have the opportunity to do other things, but they want to be with me, then that's a win for me. So I think family dynamics is so important, and there's some practical things. So I'm going to jump right into some of these practical things, like a deep commitment to each other. We don't let our kids, we didn't want our kids to be mean to each other. Our kids, Trenton, Tanner, and Thatcher, have an incredible bond. There's difference of age, but there is such an incredible bond. I loved seeing them play and want to be with each other. And the other day, Tanner came home for Easter, and he came in, and the next thing you know, they're all three on the couch, and they're cutting up like little kids, right? They're just laughing at the stupidest things, and they're all in it. And I thought, man, I love that. That's just, to me, just important. So again, a deep commitment to one another. I think communicating in a way that's constructive, where you keep it safe and it's secure, like it's constructive. If kids only hear negative or only their faults, like I never call my kids, my kids walked in the room, I'm going to say, hey, Winter, there's something positive I'm infusing into their life. I want them to know when you walk into my world, someone put it like this, like, does your eyes light up when your kids walk in, right? Or is it like discouraging, So keeping the conversation constructive. There is time to dig deep and to do the hard conversations, but we do need to keep it safe, and constructive. Showing sincere appreciation for one another. This is really when you as parents say thank you. When you serve, I try to use, it's in my books, in my notes. How can I serve Julie today? She'll go in my iPad sometime and put some things in there, and just trying to help me out, of course, right? Yeah. But honestly, how do I serve? When they see you serve, when you say that, how can I serve you? I want to serve them. That shows that I appreciate them. When I say thank you. One of the things that irritates me is when you do things for your kids and they don't say thank you, right? Like teaching them to be appreciative creates an emotional bond. How do we resolve conflicts as a family? Like, do people throw things and break things and kick things? And, is that the normative? Or do we know how to resolve conflict? Every family has conflict.
Sure.
Every family. My family has conflicts, probably more than others. But do we resolve them in a way that's healthy? I think setting boundaries and having consistency in the home, rules, kids thrive with consistency, okay? They thrive when there is routine. That's a healthy dynamic. When there's these boundaries that they know if they bump up against, there's consequences. You're not your kids' friends. You're the parent.
Right.
They need to know that there's rules and things, that the consequences. Those are just some tips. I'm sure you could add to that.
Yeah, well, I feel like we could live right there for a while,
Sure.
But for time's sake, because we want these people to come back next one. So we're going to wrap this up with this last one, because I do think they've all been amazing. This last one can be a game changer for sure, and I feel like it's sometimes overlooked for whatever reason. It's easily overlooked. And that's just the area of friendships, the connections, the relationships that we allow our kids to have. Talk to us about, I had the privilege of having two of your boys in my youth group, and I was able to watch some of the things you're going to talk about and the value in that. So talk to us about their friendships.
This really stems from when my brother was 18 years old. I'll never forget the night. He comes home and he's high, and my mom and dad know it. And it's still a living memory and picture in my mind as I'm saying this. And my mom and dad take him to the back room, and they have this tough conversation with my brother. What took place for the next 20 years changed his life and our family life. Like, he was married 3 times, has 14 kids, doesn't have custody of his kids except one. Now, thankfully, to his credit, he is in church now. Yeah. God has redeemed his life, and he's an incredible brother, and he's an incredible man, and he weeps over his kids and prays over his kids like he's doing a lot of rebuilding, and God bless him. It triggered with a friendship. And, wow. and again, friendships mold our kids, and we cannot just allow anybody walk into our kids' lives. And so, we didn't let friendships just be what they are. Like, again, there were a lot of times, high school, they were in public school, they would have friends, they were involved in football, and there would be things. If I couldn't go, we didn't go.
Yeah.
We didn't just let them go to a friend from school's party or friends from school. We really we were sometimes mean mom and dad. We were sometimes, the mom and dad that were, out of touch or whatever. But I will tell you on this side of it, I have a 25-year-old and 22. I have zero regrets. I'll give you another one. We didn't allow sleepovers. That happened rarely. And if it did, it normally happened at our place. But there has been a lot of things that you do not want to happen at sleepovers. Now, I want to be clear. I don't believe that happens at every sleepover.
Sure.
But I remember it happened at a sleepover I've been in.
Sure.
And my wife would testify the same way. At that point, it takes one instant.
That's exactly right.
And your kid is never the same again, right? And I know you could be too overprotective. I get that. I think sometimes that there's a wisdom here. But again, this is one of the things that we just said we're not willing to do. We want to make sure that you can go over it like there's a sleepover. Go, stay as long, but it's time to go to bed. I'm coming to pick you up. Yeah. I've been to houses at 2 or 3 in the morning picking up kids, right? With somebody being angry, getting in the car and, not understanding. I don't care. That I have to protect that friendship. But the other thing I think, or one of the important elements is when my kids had friends, I wanted to be interested in those kids.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be able to look at that kid in the eye and say, you know what? You are one of the closest things to something that's so dear to me. And at some point, you have influence over him. And I just want you to know, I need you. Like I'm partnering with my kids' friends, okay?
That's a great word.
I am. I don't have any regrets in that, okay? Now, there were some kids that again, did dumb stuff, and again, kids are going to be kids. I get that. But as best as we can control, I wanted to do that. And so, I know there's a lot of debate there. There's a lot of questions even with this. But the overall arching thing is you want to protect who is influencing your kids. I had a great statement. I've sent this to my growth group, and it's on this idea of friendship by Ronald Sharp on how friendships transform us. And this is what he says. It's not about what someone can do for you. It's who and what the two of you become in each other's presence.
Wow.
Like when you're with somebody, what do you two become? Is it better? Is it healthy?
Yeah.
Is it good? Yeah. Or does it become something that you guys are a wicked soup and it begins to break down? So I know these are some challenges. I pray that something that we're said, every one of these areas are important.
Yeah, and I first of all, I appreciate your transparency through this. As we stated right at the top of the episode, we certainly don't feel like we've got it all figured out.
Sure.
I recognize where I'm at, as a parent and the age of kids that I do. So I try my best to never look at the parent of a teenager and pretend like I know what they're going through or what they're facing with their kid. But I hope that what the listeners, if you're listening still, that you can hear our heartbeat through this, that we're all in this together. We're learning a lot of this. We learn as we go. But I pray that some of these tips, some of the practical things that was shared in this episode, that you can grab on, and it's a tool for you right where you're at. Wherever you're dealing with your kid, wherever season you're in. We pray that it was a resource for you. And so, as is our tradition, 2 things. We want to share a favorite verse from a volunteer, but we also want to just share, an action item, something that we're asking the listeners to do. So let's start. What are you asking our listeners to do?
Yeah, here's the challenge. What one of these 6 areas that needs the conversation right now? Like what one of them? Is it family? Is it friends? Is it self-esteem? Is it sexuality? Is it God? Which one of these needs a conversation? Whatever that one is for your kid, or, it may be different for each kid, just have the conversation.
Yeah.
Just have the conversation.
So good. All right. So today's volunteer is a legend volunteer.
For sure.
And that is Sister Becky Williams. Sister Becky Williams is just a pioneer, pillar member of Goodlettsville Pentecostal Church, has an amazing spirit, just an elder, a true elder among us. And we love her very much. And so she has a favorite verse that she wants to share today.
Let me just chime in with you, Brother Billy. Sister Becky, we love you so much. We're indebted to you. You have loved so many families and kids. You are always such a mother of Zion, a mother in this church, a spiritual mom to so many. You have opened up your heart, your home to countless of people you have loved, prayed for. And we just want to say we're so honored to have you a part of our church family. Our church is what it is because of you. And I just want to say thank you for your volunteerism, for your heart, your prayers, being a mother of Zion, to being a spiritual mother, a strength to us. You're a pillar. We could go on and on. Sure. This is just one of those amazing volunteers that we're just privileged to have. Her favorite verse is John 14:1. What a powerful verse. So I'll read it. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go and to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. We love you, Sister Becky.
Love you, Sister Becky. Thank you all for listening. Moms, dads, pray it's blessed you. You got this. We're in it together. See you next time on Between Sundays.